The storm was not supposed to be this bad. That was the first mistake. At 6:42 p.m., the Weather Service upgraded the advisory from heavy snowfall to blizzard conditions, but by then, Emily Carter was already on the mountain road. The narrow highway had disappeared beneath a thick, shifting blanket of white. Wind screamed through the pine trees like something alive, something angry, bending branches until they cracked and snapped in the darkness. Emily was 26, a freelance photographer, used to cold, used to remote places. She had driven into worse conditions before, chasing storms, chasing abandoned towns, chasing the kind of isolation that made her feel like she could finally hear her own thoughts. She had told her sister she'd be back before midnight. She had said it casually, like it was guaranteed. At 7:11 p.m., her phone connected briefly to a weak signal tower on the eastern ridge. That was the last clean data point investigators would ever have. After that, everything became guesswork. The call came in to emergency dispatch at 7:19 p.m. The operator later described the voice as distant, like it was coming from underwater. Emily identified herself. Her breathing was fast, uneven. She said she had slid off the road. She said she couldn't see. She said the snow was coming in through the vents. The dispatcher asked for her location. Emily tried to answer. The wind howled so loudly over the call that entire words were ripped away. What came through sounded fragmented, broken. Mile marker, trees, can't feel my hands. The dispatcher instructed her to stay in the car. Emily didn't respond right away. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, slower. I hear something outside. The dispatcher assumed it was the wind. Emily didn't. She said it again. I hear something walking. Search and rescue later confirmed that in blizzard conditions with 40-mile-per-hour winds, sound can play tricks on the brain. Snow can scrape against metal. Ice can shift. Trees can groan. But the dispatcher would testify later that Emily didn't sound confused. She sounded afraid. At 7:23 p.m., the call dropped. Multiple attempts to reconnect failed. Her phone never pinged again. By 8:10 p.m., local authorities initiated a search. By then, visibility had dropped to less than 20 feet. Rescue trucks could barely stay on the road. Snowmobiles were grounded. Helicopters were impossible. The storm had sealed the mountain. Emily's parents drove through the night from 3 counties away. They arrived to flashing lights, whiteout conditions, and a command center set up in a closed ranger station. Her car had not been located. No debris. No tire tracks. No sign that a vehicle had ever left the road. It was as if she had simply vanished into the storm. By morning, the temperature had dropped to degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia could set in within minutes. Survival time outside was measured in hours. At best, search dogs were brought in. They lost her scent within 50 yards of the roadway. Rescuers assumed she had wandered. Disoriented. Looking for help. That assumption would later haunt every person involved. Because 3 miles from where her phone last pinged, deep in a ravine choked with snow and dead branches, something was lying beneath the surface. Something that would not be found for 6 days. And when they finally uncovered her, the first rescuer on scene would radio a message that would freeze the command center into silence. Not because Emily Carter was dead, but because she was. Her skin was blue. Her eyelashes were frozen together. Her clothes were stiff with ice. Her body temperature was so low that medical equipment could barely register it. And yet, when a gloved hand brushed snow from her face, one of her fingers moved. Just barely. Not a reflex, not a spasm, a slow, deliberate twitch, as if something inside her was still holding on, as if something had refused to let her go. And that was when the rescuers realized that the real mystery was not how Emily Carter had vanished. It was what had happened to her during the 6 days she had been missing. Because when doctors later asked her what she had seen in the storm, she didn't talk about the cold. She didn't talk about the crash. She talked about the dark. She talked about the sound of breathing that was not her own. She talked about footsteps circling her in the snow. And she talked about the moment when she stopped feeling afraid, because something else had taken its place. The first night was the worst. That was what Emily would say later. Not because of the cold, but because of the waiting. When the call dropped, she sat in the driver's seat with both hands locked around the steering wheel, even though the engine was already dead. Snow slammed into the windshield in thick, violent sheets. The headlights illuminated nothing but swirling white, like she was trapped inside a moving tunnel. She tried the ignition again. Nothing. The battery had drowned in cold. Her breath fogged the cabin instantly. The windows began to frost from the inside, thin white veins crawling across the glass. Emily forced herself to stay calm. She checked her phone. No signal. No bars. No emergency data. The clock read 7:31 p.m. She told herself to wait. That was what they always said. Stay with the vehicle. It's easier to find a car than a person. But the sound came back. Not the wind. Not the trees. A rhythm. Crunchy. Pause. Crunchy. Slow footsteps in deep snow. They circled the car once, then stopped. Emily held her breath. She listened so hard that her ears rang. The sound came again. Closer this time. She leaned forward, wiping frost from a small circle on the windshield with her sleeve. At first, she saw nothing. Then something moved at the edge of the headlight beam. A shape. Tall. Too tall to be a deer. It crossed from left to right and disappeared into the white. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She told herself it was a trick of light. A drifting branch. Her own panic filling in gaps. Then something hit the side of the car. Not hard. Not violent. A soft, deliberate thump. Like a gloved hand resting against metal. Emily whispered, "Hello." Her voice sounded small. The thump came again. Driver's side door. Her door handle rattled once. Just a little. Emily froze. No one spoke. No flashlight beam cut through the storm. Just breathing. Close. Too close. She slid across the seat to the passenger side, locking that door even though it was already locked. She raised her phone, trying to use the camera as a light. The beam was weak. It caught flakes of snow and nothing else. The handle rattled again, then stopped. The footsteps retreated. Crunchy. Crunchy. Gone. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time lost meaning in the white noise of the storm. Emily wrapped herself in her jacket and waited for rescue. But rescue never came that night. The cold crept in slowly at first. A numbness in her fingers. Then her toes. She stomped her feet, rubbed her hands together, breathed into her gloves. The car became an icebox. Her thoughts grew slow. Heavy. She started to feel sleepy. That was when she knew she was in real danger. Hypothermia didn't feel like panic. It felt like peace. Like giving up. Emily slapped her own face. Hard. She forced herself to open the door. The wind nearly knocked her over. She stepped into knee-deep snow, instantly soaked. The cold hit her like knives, but it woke her up. She shouted into the storm. No answer. No lights. No sound except wind. She could barely see the car behind her. She took a few steps away, then a few more. She told herself she could find the road, that she could find a marker, that she could walk until someone saw her. But the mountain swallowed sound, swallowed direction, swallowed distance. After less than 100 yards, she couldn't see her own footprints. They filled in behind her almost instantly. That was when she realized she was lost. She turned in a slow circle. Nothing but white. The sense of being watched returned. Stronger now. She felt it in her back, between her shoulders. That pressure you feel when someone is standing behind you. She didn't turn around right away. She didn't want to see, because some part of her already knew something was there. When she finally turned, there was no one. Just a dark line in the snow. A depression, as if something heavy had been standing there, watching her, waiting. Emily ran. Not fast. She couldn't. Her legs felt thick, heavy. She ran blindly downhill, toward darker shapes that might have been trees or might have been rocks. The wind tore at her. Snow filled her mouth. Her lungs burned. She slipped. She fell. She rolled. The world tilted. And then the ground disappeared beneath her. She didn't scream. The cold knocked the sound out of her. She tumbled into darkness. Branches tore at her jacket. Her shoulder slammed into stone. Then everything went black. When she came to, she was lying at the bottom of something narrow and steep. A ravine. Snow was already drifting down on top of her. She tried to move. Pain exploded through her leg. She screamed then. The sound was swallowed instantly. Above her, the storm continued. And somewhere beyond the edge of her vision, she heard footsteps again. Closer than before. Slower. More certain. Crunchy. Pause. Crunchy. And this time, they did not go away. By the third night, the town stopped sleeping. Not because of fear alone, but because of what people thought they heard. At first, it was dismissed as wind. The Ozark gusts could howl like animals, screech through metal signs, and make old barns groan like something alive inside them. But multiple residents, miles apart, began reporting the same thing. A woman crying. Not screaming, not shouting for help. Crying. Long, broken sobs carried on the wind, drifting in and out of hearing range. Some swore it came from the tree line. Others said it sounded closer, like it was moving, as if whatever was making the sound wasn't staying in one place. Deputy Harris was the first to take it seriously. He'd been on the force long enough to know when small-town rumors followed a pattern. 3 calls in one night about the same strange noise wasn't coincidence. It was a signal. He drove out toward Ridgeline Road just after midnight, headlights cutting narrow tunnels through thick snowfall. Visibility was so poor he could barely see the edge of the pavement. Every few seconds, his wipers slapped ice aside, only for more to instantly replace it. Then he heard it. Not through the radio, not imagined. A faint, broken sob. He rolled down his window despite the freezing air. The sound grew clearer, soft, exhausted, like someone who had cried for hours and no longer had the strength to be loud. "Hello," he called out. Nothing answered. The crying stopped. Dead silence followed, so complete that Harris could hear his own breathing, fogging the inside of the patrol car. He stood there for almost a full minute, scanning the trees, his flashlight beam cutting through snow and darkness. No footprints, no movement, no sign that anyone had been there at all. When he returned to his vehicle, he found something that made his stomach drop. Handprints. Not on the outside. On the inside of his windshield. Small, uneven prints, smeared slightly, as if someone had pressed their hands against the glass from within the car. Harris stumbled back, heart hammering, his breath turning ragged. He knew he had been alone. He knew no one had opened the doors. The patrol car had been locked. And yet the handprints were there. They faded within minutes as the heater defrosted the glass, leaving behind nothing but condensation and a growing sense that something about this case was deeply wrong. The next morning, search teams found the first real physical clue. A scarf. It was partially buried under drifted snow near an abandoned logging trail. Red, knit, the same one Emily's mother had shown deputies in the missing person photo. But what chilled them wasn't just that it was there. It was warm. Not warm like it had been recently worn and dropped. Warm like it had been kept close to a body. Searchers exchanged uneasy glances. In temperatures that low, fabric should have been stiff, brittle, frozen solid. This scarf was. When they lifted it, steam rose faintly into the air. That discovery changed everything. Rescue teams expanded the grid. Thermal drones were brought in. Volunteers doubled. The assumption shifted from recovery to rescue. If the scarf was warm, then someone nearby might still be alive. They followed a faint trail of disturbance in the snow, not full footprints, but drag marks, shallow grooves, broken crust where something heavy had been pulled or crawled across the frozen surface. The trail led away from the main road, deeper into the forest, toward an area locals avoided. An old sinkhole valley. The land there dipped sharply, forming natural pits and crevices that filled with snow and shadow. It was easy to fall in, harder to get out, the kind of place where a body could disappear and never be found. As the team descended, radio signals began to weaken. One volunteer swore he felt watched. Another said she smelled something metallic in the air. Then one of the thermal operators froze. "I've got a heat signature," he said. The screen showed a faint shape. Human-sized. Barely warmer than the surrounding snow. So cold that it almost blended into the landscape. "Could be a deer," someone said. But the shape didn't move like an animal. It was curled, folded in on itself, like someone trying to protect their core. They moved fast, too fast to think. Branches snapped, snow collapsed under boots, flashlights danced wildly as adrenaline overrode caution. When they finally reached the spot, they didn't see her at first. She was covered in snow. Not buried, but layered, as if the storm itself had tried to hide her. They brushed away the top layer carefully. Then another. Then they saw her face. Emily's skin was pale, not blue, not gray, but waxy, almost translucent. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes. Her lips were cracked, dusted with frost. Her eyes were closed. Her chest wasn't moving. For a moment, everyone thought they were too late. Then one rescuer pressed fingers to her neck. And froze. "I feel something," he whispered. "A pulse. Weak. Irregular. But real." Emily's heart was alive. Even though her body temperature was so low it barely registered. Even though she had been exposed for days. Even though medically it shouldn't have been possible. They wrapped her in thermal blankets, oxygen masks placed over her face, hands shaking as they worked. One medic began crying quietly, unable to stop. But as they lifted her onto the stretcher, something slipped from beneath her coat. A piece of fabric. Not hers. Not from any of her clothes. Dark. Rough. Almost like part of a uniform. And stained with something that wasn't snow. As the helicopter blades began to spin, drowning out the forest in deafening noise, one of the rescuers noticed something else. Emily's fingers. They were curled tightly around something. Whatever it was, she refused to let go. Even when unconscious. Even when hypothermic. Even when her muscles should have been too weak to grip anything at all. They tried to gently pry her hand open. They couldn't. Her grip was locked. Like her body was protecting a secret. And whatever she was holding, it wasn't coming with them willingly. At the hospital, doctors moved with controlled urgency. Emily's core temperature was so low that the machines struggled to read it accurately. The monitor alarms didn't blare, they whispered, slow beeps, long gaps between heartbeats, numbers that made nurses exchange looks they didn't want the family to see. Hypothermia, that severe usually meant one thing. Brain damage. If not death. They cut away her frozen clothing. The fabric cracked as it separated from her skin. Her jacket had ice fused into the seams. Her boots were filled with frozen slush and blood. Not much blood, but enough to mean she had been injured before she collapsed. They worked on rewarming her slowly. Too fast could kill her. Warm IV fluids, heated blankets, a forced air warming system. Every step was careful, calculated, tense. Her parents were kept in a small waiting room down the hall. They weren't crying anymore. They had passed that stage. Now they just stared at the wall, holding hands so tightly their knuckles turned white, afraid that if they let go, something worse would happen. After 40 minutes, a nurse came out. "She's stable," she said. "Not okay. Not safe. Stable." It was the best word they could offer. Inside the trauma room, a doctor finally managed to loosen Emily's clenched hand. Whatever she had been holding dropped onto the tray with a dull, soft sound. It was a glove. Not a winter glove. A work glove. Dark gray, heavy-duty fabric, the kind used by construction workers, loggers, or mechanics. The inside was damp with melted snow and something darker. Blood. Not all of it matched Emily's. They bagged it as evidence. That single object shifted the case. This was no longer just a disappearance. It was an investigation. Deputy Harris returned to the forest with state police and search specialists. The sinkhole valley was sealed off. Tape fluttered weakly in the cold wind. Boot prints crisscrossed the snow where Emily had been found. But there was something wrong. No clear trail in. No clear trail out. It looked like she had appeared there. As if the storm had placed her. Thermal drones scanned again. Ground teams searched for footprints, blood trails, broken branches, anything. They found none. Except for one thing. About 30 yards away, partially buried in a snowbank, they uncovered a shallow depression. Not a grave. Not a pit. More like a place where someone had been lying for a long time. Long enough to melt snow beneath them. But there was no body. Just compressed earth and a faint smell that didn't belong in a frozen forest. Metallic. Rotting. Human. The search dogs reacted badly. One refused to go near the spot. Another began whining and pulling at its leash, ears flat, tail low. The handler said later he'd never seen that reaction before. Back at the hospital, Emily drifted in and out of consciousness. When she opened her eyes for the first time, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She whispered. "No more," she said. Over and over. "No more. No more." The nurse tried to calm her, asked her where she was, told her she was safe, that her parents were nearby. Emily didn't seem to hear. Her eyes tracked something no one else could see. The corner of the ceiling. The door. The shadows behind medical equipment. Her heart rate spiked whenever someone touched her unexpectedly. When a doctor leaned too close, she flinched so hard she nearly ripped out her IV. They sedated her lightly to prevent shock. But before she drifted off again, she said something that made the room go silent. He said I wasn't supposed to wake up. The words were flat, not emotional, like she was repeating something she'd been told. The doctor asked who. Emily didn't answer. Later that night, her mother was allowed in for a few minutes. She held Emily's hand gently, afraid to squeeze too hard. "Emmy," she whispered, "it's Mom, you're safe, you're home." Emily's eyes filled with tears. But she shook her head. "No," she whispered. Her mother smiled weakly. "Yes, you're here, we found you." Emily swallowed. He said home was underground. Her mother froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Emily closed her eyes. "I don't like the dark anymore." She turned her face toward the wall and refused to say anything else. Meanwhile, lab results came back on the glove. The blood belonged to two people. One was Emily. The other was male. Unidentified. And there was something else on the fabric. Fine particles. Soil. Not from the sinkhole valley. Not from anywhere nearby. The lab tech flagged it as coming from a different geological layer. Deeper. Older. Like soil that hadn't seen the surface in a very long time. Which raised a question no one wanted to ask out loud. Where had Emily really been? And how far underground had she gone? State investigators arrived before sunrise. Two unmarked vehicles, no lights, no sirens, just doors opening quietly in the hospital parking lot and people in heavy coats stepping into the cold. They didn't want attention. Not yet. Emily was moved to a secure floor, not officially under guard, but not unguarded either. A uniformed officer sat at the end of the hallway, pretending to scroll on his phone. The room smelled of antiseptic and melting snow. Emily's body temperature was climbing, but her mind was somewhere else. The trauma specialist tried again. Soft voice, no pressure. "Emily, can you tell me what happened out there?" At first, she said nothing. Her eyes were open, but unfocused. Then she whispered, "I fell." The doctor nodded. "You fell where?" "A hole." "What kind of hole?" Emily hesitated. "Not a hole," she said, "a door." That made the doctor stop writing. "A door in the ground." Emily nodded slightly. It was already open. Deputy Harris stood against the wall, arms crossed. He had seen a lot in 20 years on the job. People lied, people imagined things, trauma twisted memories. But her tone wasn't confused. It was precise. "Who opened it?" the doctor asked. Emily's jaw tightened. "He did." "Who is he?" She shook her head. "He didn't like his name." They exchanged looks. "Was he there when you fell?" "Yes." "Did he push you?" Emily's breathing changed. "Shorter. Faster." "He said I had to come inside," she whispered, said the storm was lying. The doctor leaned forward slightly, lying about what? "That it would kill me." Emily's eyes finally met his. He said the cold was safer than the dark. Silence filled the room. Deputy Harris cleared his throat. "Emily, how long were you underground?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers picked at the blanket. "I don't know," she said. There was no phone, no light, only his lantern. "What did you eat?" "Nothing." "What did you drink?" She frowned. Water from the walls. The doctor wrote slower now. Did he hurt you? Emily didn't respond. Not yes. Not no. Her heart monitor ticked louder in the silence. He said I was lucky, she finally whispered. He said most people don't wake up after they freeze. Harris stepped closer. Most people. Emily swallowed. There were shoes. The room felt smaller. Shoes where? Harris asked. In a pile. A pile of shoes. She nodded. Different sizes, men's, women's, kids. The doctor stopped completely. Did you see anyone else down there? Emily shook her head. Not alive. Harris felt a cold line move down his spine. Emily, did you see bodies? She stared at the ceiling. Not whole. The interview ended shortly after. She was shaking. Not from cold. From memory. Back in the forest, the search perimeter expanded. They brought in geological survey teams. Old maps. Mining records. Abandoned tunnel data. The area had once been explored decades ago for small-scale mining. Most shafts were sealed. Most. Aerial scans revealed a subtle depression almost half a mile from where Emily had been found. Covered by brush. Covered by snow. Almost invisible. When they cleared it, they found a rusted metal frame. Not natural. A hatch. It was partially hidden under fallen branches and dirt. The lock was broken. Vorsed. Inside, a ladder descended into darkness. The air that came out of it was warmer than the forest air. And it smelled wrong. Damp. Stale. Organic. Like a place that had been breathing underground for a long time. They lowered a camera first. The footage was grainy. Walls reinforced with rotting timber. Handwritten markings on the wood. Scratches. Tallies. And then the camera light passed over something that made the tech freeze the feed. A lantern. Modern. Not abandoned mining era. Next to it, a sleeping mat. Food wrappers. Plastic bottles. Recent. This wasn't an old mine. This was being used. They shut the hatch. Secured the area. Called in state and federal support. Because now they weren't just looking at a missing person case. They were looking at a possible underground dwelling. A hidden shelter. Or something worse. Back at the hospital, Emily woke screaming. Not a nightmare scream. A warning scream. They're cold, she cried. Nurses rushed in. Who's cold, Emily? She grabbed the bed rails. The shoes, she sobbed, they're still wearing them. Her mother held her face gently. Who is still wearing them? Emily shook. They never took them off. Her eyes went wide. He said it was easier to move them that way. The room went silent again. Harris stood in the doorway. How many, Emily? She squeezed her eyes shut. I stopped counting. Her breathing hitched. He didn't like when I counted. The words hung in the air. Underground. Cold. Shoes. A man without a name. And a place no one was supposed to survive. They now knew one thing for certain. Emily had not simply gotten lost. She had been taken somewhere. Somewhere hidden. Somewhere no one would hear her scream. And whoever put her there had done it before. The warrant came through at 2:17 a.m. By 3:05, the road into the forest was closed. No press. No civilians. Just unmarked trucks, state police, and a federal task unit with portable lighting, thermal gear, and underground search equipment. They treated the hatch like a crime scene and a tomb. The first team went down slowly. 2 officers, 1 engineer, 1 medic. Their helmet cams streamed back to a command tent set up among the trees. The forest was silent except for generators and the low hum of radios. The ladder groaned under their weight. 15 feet down, the air changed. Thicker, warmer, wet. Condensation formed on camera lenses almost immediately. At 30 feet, the tunnel widened. Reinforced beams, some newer than others. Someone had been maintaining this. The walls were carved with marks. Not mining marks. Handprints. Small ones. Child-sized. Scratched into the wood and rock. The engineer whispered, "This isn't natural." The medic didn't respond. They moved deeper. The lantern seen on camera was still there. Warm. Recently used. A mattress lay against the wall. Stained. The stains weren't all rust. They reached a branching corridor. One path sloped downward. The other narrowed. The narrower one smelled worse. That's the one they took. 10 yards in, they found the first shoe. A small sneaker. Worn. Then another. Then a boot. Not in pairs. Single. Scattered. As if dropped. Or removed. The camera zoomed on something hanging from a nail. A child's jacket. Pink. Frozen stiff. Inside it, folded carefully, was a sock. The officer holding the camera whispered a name. No one in the tent could hear it. They continued. The tunnel opened into a chamber. Roughly carved. Low ceiling. Lantern hooks along the walls. And in the center, a pile. Not neat. Not chaotic. A mound of clothing. Shoes. Belts. Backpacks. Hair ties. Gloves. Hundreds of personal items. Some old. Some recent. The medic backed away. "Oh God," she whispered. Behind the pile, partially covered by a tarp, were shapes. Human shapes. Wrapped. Not buried. Stacked. The engineer gagged. The feed went quiet for a moment. Then one officer said, "We've got multiple victims." That was an understatement. They began marking, photographing, bagging. Every item was tagged. Every body was counted. Most were skeletal. Some were not. Cold preserved more than it destroyed. They found ID fragments, wallets, cracked phones, keychains, a bracelet with a name etched into it. Not Emily. The chamber extended farther back. And there, carved into the wall, were tallies. Dozens of them. Grouped. Each group separated by a long scratch. Like chapters. Like eras. Someone had been here a long time. Back at the hospital, Emily's sedation was reduced. They needed more. She needed to tell them more. Deputy Harris sat beside her bed. No notepad this time. Just his voice. "Emily, we found the place." Her eyes closed. She didn't look relieved. She looked afraid. "He's going to be mad," she whispered. "Emily, he can't hurt you anymore." She shook her head slowly. "He doesn't like doors being closed." Harris leaned in. "Emily, did he ever leave you alone down there?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Sometimes a whole day." "What did he say when he left?" She swallowed. "He said to be quiet for the sleepers." Harris felt his stomach tighten. The sleepers. That's what he called them. Who are they? She opened her eyes. They don't wake up. The doctor asked gently, Emily, did he ever bring anyone new? Her lips trembled. Yes. Children. She nodded. Women. Another nod. Men. A pause. Yes. Did you see them alive? Sometimes. What happened to them? Emily stared at the wall. He said the cold helped them sleep. Silence stretched. Harris spoke carefully. Emily, how did you survive? She took a shaky breath. He liked me. That sentence landed heavier than any other. Why? Harris asked. She didn't answer. Tears rolled down her temples into her hair. He said I reminded him of someone, she whispered. Someone who didn't wake up. Back underground, the team found a second chamber. Smaller. Cleaner. This one had a table. A chair. Notes taped to the wall. Handwritten. List. Dates. Names. Some crossed out. Some circled. Some underlined. The camera focused on one list. The last name on it was fresh. Still dark with ink. Emily Carter. The team went still. The medic said she was on a list. The implication was clear. She was never meant to leave. And whoever built this place had a system. A process. A schedule. Which meant one terrifying thing. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a method. A routine. A way of life. And somewhere, the man who called it home was still out there. The task force profile came back within hours. This was not an impulsive offender. This was not a one-time crime. The structure underground, the organization of personal effects, the tallies, the lists, all of it pointed to someone methodical. Someone patient. Someone who had been doing this for years. Possibly decades. They brought in behavioral analysts. They studied the chamber layouts. The way bodies were stacked. The way clothing was separated. The way shoes were removed, but not discarded. One analyst said quietly, he keeps trophies, but not for pride. For what then? Harris asked. For memory, she replied. He's preserving people, not just killing them. That made the room colder than the forest outside. They ran missing persons databases against the items recovered. One bracelet matched a girl who vanished 12 years earlier. A cracked phone matched a man reported missing after a hiking trip 8 years ago. A child's backpack matched a boy taken from a campground. Case after case. Different towns. Different states. All connected by wilderness. Snow. Remote trails. Places where storms could erase tracks. This man didn't hunt people in cities. He hunted where the cold could help him. At the underground site, they expanded deeper. Beyond the main chambers, they found smaller crawl spaces. Observation points. Narrow slits cut into rock where someone could watch without being seen. In one of them, they found a blanket. Still warm. Fresh footprints. Not from the team. Not from Emily. Recent. He was here, one officer said, after we found her. That meant he had returned. To the scene. To his underground world. To see what was left. To see what had been taken. To see what had gone wrong. That made him more dangerous. At the hospital, Emily became agitated. She kept asking for the lights to stay on. Every light. Even during the day. She refused to close her eyes unless someone was holding her hand. When a nurse stepped out of the room briefly, Emily began screaming. Not in fear. In certainty. "He's here," she cried. The hallway froze. Security rushed in. There was no one there. No man. No stranger. No footsteps. Just empty corridor. But Emily wouldn't stop shaking. "He knows I told," she whispered. "He said if I told, he would move them." "Move who?" Harris asked. "The sleepers." Harris felt something twist in his chest. "Emily, where would he move them?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but he said there are other doors." Other doors. Other underground places. Other chambers. Other piles. The search widened across the region. They pulled records of sinkholes, old mines, abandoned shelters, civil defense bunkers, anything that could be hidden, anything that could be sealed, anything that could be opened quietly. The profile suggested the offender lived locally. Someone who knew the terrain. Someone who understood winter survival. Someone who could move through storms. Someone who blended in. They released a limited internal bolo to law enforcement. Not to the public. Not yet. They didn't want him spooked. But it might already be too late. At the underground site, they found something new. A fresh footprint in mud, leading away from the second chamber, toward a narrow exit tunnel, not marked on any map. A back way out. The camera followed it. The tunnel rose gradually. Air grew colder. Snow filtered in through cracks. At the end, they found a hidden exit, camouflaged with branches and rock. From the outside, it looked like nothing. From the inside, it was a perfect escape. He had planned for this. Planned for discovery. Planned for pursuit. Which meant he had likely already moved on. At the hospital, Emily finally said something she hadn't before. She said it while half asleep. "He smells like wet dirt." Harris leaned closer. "Who smells like wet dirt, Emily?" "Him." "Did he ever tell you where he lived?" She frowned. "He said he lives where people don't look. Like the forest." She shook her head slightly. "No, where they think they already know." That didn't make sense. Until later, when a forensic tech came into the command room with a small evidence bag. Inside was a patch. From a jacket. A uniform patch. Park Services. Not federal. Not state police. Local. Which meant something no one wanted to say yet. The man who built the underground chambers. The man who hunted during snowstorms. The man who kept people sleeping underground. Might have been someone trusted. Someone with access. Someone who knew exactly where to search. And exactly where no one ever would. The name broke the case. Not from a database. Not from a fingerprint. From a quiet realization no one wanted to accept. The uniform patch belonged to Northridge County Park Services. A small department. 6 full-time employees. All local. All trusted. All with unrestricted access to trail systems, emergency shelters, maintenance tunnels, and historical site records. The kind of access that never raised alarms. The kind of access that never left a trail. They narrowed it down quickly. Only one employee had worked there long enough to match the age of the underground chambers. Only one had transferred between districts over the years. Only one had specialized in trail maintenance, sinkhole stabilization, and old mine sealing. His name was Thomas Greer. 58 years old. Divorced. Lived alone. No criminal record. known as quiet, reliable, the kind of man people described as invisible. When they searched his personnel file, something stood out. He had been the one to report several of the original sinkholes as naturally sealed, meaning he had personally inspected them, meaning he had personally decided they were safe, meaning he had personally ensured no one would ever go looking. A warrant was issued. By the time they reached his home, it was empty. The bed was made. The fridge was unplugged. The walls were bare. He had left, not in a rush, in preparation. They searched his truck, still parked at a remote trailhead. Inside, they found supplies: lantern fuel, blankets, packaged food, medical tape, thermal gloves, and a handwritten map, marked with symbols, circles, X's, multiple locations, other doors. The man had not built one underground world. He had built several. The manhunt lasted 4 days. Snow fell again on the third night. Heavy, blinding, the kind of storm he loved. On the fourth morning, a hiker reported smoke coming from a remote ravine. Search teams followed it. They found another hatch, another ladder, another underground chamber. But this one was different. There were no piles, no shoes, no bodies, just one man, Thomas Greer, sitting on a folding chair, lantern lit, hands folded. He did not run. He did not resist. He looked relieved. When they arrested him, he said only one thing: she wasn't supposed to wake up. At trial, the full scope came out. At least 23 confirmed victims. Possibly more. Decades of disappearances. Storms used as cover. Cold used as a tool. Underground chambers used as storage. As preservation. As control. He was convicted on multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. Sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. He never showed emotion. Not when the verdict was read. Not when the families spoke. Not when the photos were shown. Not even when Emily testified. Emily survived. Physically. But some things never left her. She still sleeps with the lights on. She still panics in enclosed spaces. She still wakes up when it snows. Because part of her is still underground. Still listening to the drip of water from stone walls. Still hearing boots on dirt floors. Still seeing piles of shoes. Still hearing the word he used for the dead. Sleepers. Her parents say she is alive, but not untouched. Because surviving something like that doesn't mean you escape it. It means you carry it. The forest was reopened months later. Hikers returned. Snow fell. Tracks vanished. Life went on. But beneath the ground, the chambers were sealed forever. Filled with concrete. Erased from maps. Buried. Not because they were forgotten, but because some doors should never be opened again. And some cold places should stay silent. Because sometimes being found alive is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of living with what should have killed you. And knowing that the dark didn't take you. It only let you go.